Hello everyone, Tina here. I hope your day is going wonderful. Thanks for joining me. Today is release day over at the Simon Says Stamp Shop. They're celebrating a brand new release and it's called Love You Too. That's T-O-O. Last month was the Love You release. This is kind of like another continuation of it, so it's Love You Too release. The item that I get to share with you today is part of the release. It's called Forest Scenery. And it is basically a huge stamp set at 6x8 that's filled with lots of different sizes of pine trees. There's different sizes and shapes, and then there's also some stags and reindeer in here. So I thought it would be perfect to create a watercolored masculine card. I'm taking some Canson XL watercolor cardstock and I'm trimming it down to a panel size that measures 3 3/4 inches by 5 inches. Now we're going to make a landscape style card today. So we are going to basically grab 4 trees that are around the same sizes. We don't want the itty bitties. We want basically the larger trees. So I'm just placing them on an acrylic block. These have a kind of a organic look to them as it is. So we're going to create a watercolor effect with it. So it's just going to basically enhance the look of these. Watercoloring is easy to do. You just, I'm going to show you how here in just a minute. I love doing this effect and I think the outcome is very neat. I'm using some Concord 9th inks. I like these because they're water-based. When I add water to them, the color does spread a little bit. I'm starting off with my parsley and we're going to add a little bit of wheat on the side of my parsley. I'm using a craft card base and I wanted to bring in that craft color. So this is a great way to do it. Now's the fun part. I'm going to use my spray bottle, add some water over my stamped, and then we're going to just stamp it and hold it on our watercolor cardstock. And then you're going to lift it straight up and then you can see it kind of pools a little bit, but that's okay. It's going to dry really quick and it's going to absorb in that paper. I'm going to do the same thing, but this time we're just using one ink. I'm going to use Evergreen, add a spray of water, and then we're going to overlap and stamp the second Christmas tree. Oh, I'm going to call it a Christmas tree. It's a pine tree, guys. It could be a Christmas tree, but I still have Christmas on the brain. We just took down our Christmas stuff, so if I call them Christmas trees, I hope you know what I mean. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing with my next tree. This time we're using a Clover ink. I think it's nice if you have a variety of greens for your pine trees. And when I'm stamping them, I am going offsetting them and overlapping them. So we're going to fill our landscape background here. We're just going to ink it up. I'm going to, again, when I use my parsley ink, I'm going to add a little bit of that wheat. I wanted some brown in here to coordinate with my card base. And so that's a great way to do it. That one I added a little too much water to, but that's okay. I don't think there's no good or bad way to do this. But I do find if you do hold it down for a little bit, it gives it time to seep inside your cardstock. We're going to basically do one more tree. This one we're going to use our Clover ink. I'm going to add a spray of water and then we're going to go ahead and stamp this on our panel. Now once we have our panel covered, I'm going to hold it down here. I'm going to keep my inks out. I'm going to let this panel dry for just a little bit. The water does absorb into the cardstock, like I said, pretty quick, but I'm going to do one more row, but this time I'm not going to add any water to my trees. I'm going to ink them up with the same colors and stamp them a little bit lower than the first row. And I'm using, this is parsley and I think it's just a little bit too light, so I'm going to use a darker ink. I'm thinking maybe Evergreen's going to work out a little bit better, but I'm going to stamp the Evergreen a couple times. And again, we're going to go a little bit lower to create a forest, basically. This one, I wanted to lower it a little bit more on my panel, and I wanted to leave about 1/4 of an inch of my cardstock showing. So I'm going to bring in some Post-it note tape, add it to the bottom, and then stamp over the top of it. This way I still have that white bottom. I just love the way this looks out. It just turns out, I think it looks so neat. This would be great for mass producing too, guys. Okay, once my tree background is done, we're going to set this aside and we are going to stamp our, I'm not going to call it a sentiment because this stamp set does not have sentiments in it. It has more like poetic quote, not even, well, maybe poetic quotes in here. There's no quote marks on it. But there's wander, shades of green, summer, winter, there's snow, there's single words, beautiful, peaceful, magical, quiet, there's snow-covered branches, there's glittering frost, and I stamped, there's a few more too. I stamped the wonder of nature, and I stamped it on the same watercolor cardstock only because I wanted the same color. I just flipped it over to the smooth side. But I actually used the strip that we trimmed off, so that worked out great. Okay, now I'm going to bring in a little bit of pattern paper. I found some green plaid, kind of keeping with the cabiny, woodsy kind of a feel. I trimmed that down to a 1-inch strip, and then I'm going to use some corrugated cardstock here. This is usually what I used for my coffee cards, my little cup cozies. But I trimmed it down so it was horizontal, and I like the effect that this gave. I'm going to just trim it down so it's the same size as my panel. And then you can see I did adhere it to my pattern paper. We're going to pop it up with foam adhesive. Place this on the very bottom of our panel, and I'm going about a 1/4 inch up. This is why I wanted that bottom to be all white. I just like the look of that. After that's adhered, we're going to go ahead and add some twine. I'm using some natural color twine, and I'm going to not tie a bow, but tie a knot a little bit towards the left here. And then I'll just trim down my string. Now we're going to make a homemade tag. Love doing this. I just think it brings so much to a sentiment when you add it onto a card. Before we start it though, I am going to trim down a piece of fun foam and add that behind my panel and go ahead and put this on my craft card base. The fun foam that I use is adhesive backed, and so I'm just adding adhesive to the other side. I'm just using double-sided tape. I'm just gonna remove the release paper and add that behind my panel. I like to use fun foam especially on panels that I use or watercolor with, only because it helps flatten the panel. Sometimes your panel can get warped. Although this worked out pretty good. It didn't warp too much. We're going to add this in the center, and then that's good to go. Now for our tag, I have a strip of the same pattern paper that we used underneath the corrugated paper. I'm going to take that strip, add some adhesive to the very end of my well, it's not really a sentiment, but my quote there. I'm going to add some of that pattern paper. I'm going to fold it behind the back. I'm going to flip it over, add a little bit more of my tape runner. Then I could fold it over and then just trim the excess off. And then I'm going to bring in my crocodile. I'm going to go ahead and punch a hole in it, and we're going to add an eyelet to this. The eyelets that I'm using, I'm going to be using like a pewter color. I didn't want anything bright with it. I wanted to keep it with the natural tones. So we'll add that, and then we'll just secure it. I love making tags like this. I just think it makes your card extra special. Okay, I'm going to thread this through the string that we didn't tie a bow with. And as I did this, I'm thinking that it's just, I feel like it's in the middle of the card. It's not flowing right for me. So we're going to just take it off. And actually, I tried to scoot the twine over to the end, and when I did that, I ended up stretching it. So I made my twine really loose. So we're just going to remove it. Actually, I left it in because I think we all make mistakes like this when we're adding a card. I wanted to scoot this twine underneath, but you know what? We're just going to rip up our corrugated and our plaid paper. The 3M foam, sometimes you can get away with doing this. My foam squares, not so much, but the 3M foam tape you can. I decided to wrap around the twine twice. And then I'm going to secure it back in its home. And then I'm going to tie a knot all the way to the left here. This way it'll flow a little, well, not all the way to the left. I'm actually going to kind of fake adhering my tag. Okay, after we have that tied, I'm going to straighten up my twine, and then we're just going to nip off the ends of the string. I'm going to take another piece of string, we're going to thread it through our tag, and then this way I can kind of place it wherever I want it. I don't have to worry about where it ends. As long as it covers up where I trimmed on my card, I'm happy. And I think I want to place it a little bit wonky there. Okay, now I did want to use one of the deer or the stags in the set, and I chose the deer. I'm going to go through my circle dies, and I found one that was just a little bit bigger than the deer that I'm going to be using. I'm going to die cut out a piece of that same watercolor cardstock, and I'm going to ink up my deer with my wheat ink, but I think the wheat ink was too light, so I'm going to go over the entire thing with my Memento Rich Cocoa ink. I didn't even bother wiping it off, but I'm going to stamp that in the center of my circle. And I liked the Memento Rich Cocoa ink better. I just think it's darker and it stood out a little bit more. I'm going to trim off the bottom of my circle, and then we're going to add a foam square behind it, and this is going to be tucked right behind our little quote there, our little poetic saying. This would be great for a card to give to a male business partner or masculine card. I think it would be great. Okay, now I liked the rich cocoa on there, and I thought we would bring a little bit more of that rich cocoa in our background. So I took one of the smaller pine trees, and I'm stamping it directly on my panel. Now, had I not used the fun foam behind it, I would not recommend this. I would say redo it. But since my entire panel is covered with fun foam, it actually stamps pretty beautifully, and I really like the way this turned out. I'm just going to replace my sentiment and my corrugated paper there, add my deer behind my little tag, and I'm going to call that good. I'm not going to add any bells and whistles, going to keep it kind of natural. But I encourage you guys to check out the Simon release. I'll leave the link down below to the entire release if you guys want to check it out. But there's a lot of amazing stuff over there. And actually, if you want to see some project pictures, if you go to the blog over at the Simon Says Stamp Shop, click on this release and you'll see tons of inspiration with it. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a lovely day, and we will see you again real soon. Bye-bye.